Illness and Cure, authored by Joost Meerloo, Studies of Philosophy of Medicine and Mental Health. Part 1. The Concept of Disease. A historical investigation on the concept of disease and healing is needed because not only does it point out in man's eternal struggle with suffering, but it also shows on the repetition of errors. The chapter Unwitching the Witches is added because it makes us honestly ask how much we are using our own witchcraft to mask final clarification. Part 1. Hippocrates and the Art of Methodical Clinical Thinking. The history of science is largely a history of trial and error, a multitude of mistakes paving the way for more refined hypotheses and clearer glimpses of elusive truth. The history of a science also represents us with descriptions of man's various approaches to difficult problems and makes it clear that methodology always leaves its imprint on the finding. The purpose of this chapter is to demonstrate some of the ways in which changes in method and methodology approach through the years have transformed the outlook of medical students of man. Hippocrates the Great, 460 to 3377 BC, as Aristotle called him, came from the family of physicians attached to the temple of Asclepius at Kos. His concept of disease marked a historical point in man's scientific and cultural evolution, for he set forth a doctrine of mental discipline and clinical theory that served as a source of reference for practitioners for centuries thereafter. His way of thinking provides a guide for a multiple and eclectic approach to medical problems even today. Hippocrates separated medicine from magic, theology, and philosophy. He condemned witchcraft, incarnation, and sacrifices as methods of cure and initiated instead of systematic clinical study of sick persons, teaching that disease is a natural process. Natural powers are the healers of diseases. The physician has to assist nature. The breadth of Hippocrates' knowledge and the extent of his contribution make him the father of scientific medicine. But his wisdom cannot be fully appreciated without a glance of how primitive beliefs that dominated the art of healing before him. Disease and the threat of death are reacted against instinctively even by animals, and from the fields of archaeology and anthropology, we have evidence that man was therapeutically active even in the earliest period of development. Primitive man must have attained a fairly high degree of intellectual growth. However, before reaching the stage of collecting and correcting his experiences and making conscious use of his knowledge, once that had been done, remedies and practical methods of treatment came to be handed down from generation to generations. Since the ability to heal implies the ability to help others or to dominate them with mysterious magic powers, medical practice became an avenue either for expressing sympathy, charity, and cooperation, or for coercion by the sorcerer and the medicine man in possession of the magic secrets. Witchcraft and incarnation vied with magic potions, ghosts, medical charms, and sacrifices. Popular medicine is of necessity empirical. Everyday experience always precedes theoretical understanding, and medical folklore and myth have always existed alongside the theoretical and careful clinical approach, which attempts to deduce practical rules from experience. Man cannot easily drop his need for magical explanation. Popular medicine to this day betrays traces of primitive and magical need, but any premature attempt to evolve a scientific system from practical everyday trial and error medicine may lead to oversimplification. An example in the age-long search for general prototype of all remedies, one that may be prescribed indiscriminately for every disease. In the Middle Ages, many alchemists searched for the arcanum, the mystical, omnipotent remedy. In our epoch, the public often regards antibiotic as just as arcanum. Popular medicine was, and still is, concerned chiefly with treatment by means of magical potions, with expectation of magical results. Mystical cure, not in the most logical methods of treatment. Hippocrates recognizes that producing awe and astonishment in the crowd was the aim of many of the spectacular treatment, criticized this deceiving magic. Yet it is still widely practiced today. The wandering and curious spirit of primitive man was invented by the fear and oppression imposed by a controllable and the hostile universe. It is quite reasonable to suppose that awareness of suffering, disease, and death has done more to accelerate man's thinking process than any other factor in life. Primitive man felt, just as we do, the need to find explanation for his fears in order to argue them away. Direct and obvious reality was often less real to him than the imaginary world of phantoms and spirits, so his daily life was dominated by superstitions. For this reason, such inexorable phenomena as disease and death must have seemed especially horrible. Since they could not be argued away, they came to typify the unvanquishable enemy of life. More fearful than the immediate dangerous reality, this was the probing motivation behind the primitive man's animistic thinking, connoting a world in which the supernatural is supreme and ever-present, endangering life through the mysterious powers. To primitive man, and I mean here also the remnants of primitive man in ourselves, disease was an evil spirit that came to take possession of the body as punishment for moral offense against the spirit world. He who offended the demons of nature invited their revenge, and this revenge might strike down the individual, his family, a village, or an entire tribe. If the victim atoned for his offenses, the spirit might leave him, but it might also take his life. The primitive art of healing was the art of chasing hostile spirits away. Medical cure consisted, by and large, either an active expulsion of the troublesome spirits or the various forms of penance for the offenses committed against those spirits. Wizards and shamans, by virtue of hereditary birthright, special talent of empathy, or formal training, were engaged to exorcise the supernatural spirits from the sick body. It was their job to devise a magic strategy of frightening mask and healing dance to drive the demons away. Possibility of dying a natural death is an unknown concept to primitive people. It does not occur to them that the natural resistance of the body may be insufficient to overcome disease. To them, death results from the influence of a hostile spirit world. Primitive people who have broken a taboo and offended the spirits are sometimes so convinced they will be punished by death that they passively surrender to fate and do actually die. If they think that a weapon is invested with injurious magic properties, the slightest wound may be fatal to them. Many people in our time can be totally paralyzed by such fearful anticipation. Certain American Indians believe even today that husbands will fall ill if his wife eats forbidden fruit, or that when a son is ill, the bad spirit in him may be expelled if his father drinks a special potion. Among the Cherokee of the North American, rheumatism is attributed to bad influence of spirits of animals that have been killed. The Bororos impute a hunter's illness to the revenge of the animal that has been slain. Usually a so-called sympathetic therapy is used to those who believe in this magic influence of animals on man. The natives in British Columbia, for instance, have sterile women drink concoction made from wasp or fly's nest because these insects produce themselves in large numbers. This so-called prelogical, animistic, and magical thinking, which occupies a central place in the mental life of primitive people, is by no means absent from the mental life of civilized man. A recent example was a bacteriologist who believed himself infected with cholera and who died a victim of his fear and not the Vibrio cholerae. When a person who has violated accepted moral codes of behavior suffers reverse as a result of guilt and self-punishment, people tend to think that he is being punished by God, presumably, or by other spiritual forces embodied in the concept of fate. The concept of magic strategy, which appears highly irrational to sophisticated men, is prevalent in all children at a certain stage of their development. It never disappears entirely in adults and in significant influence on man's social life. Among the masses, many still retain their belief in vampires, ghosts, the evil eye, and werewolves which prey on the man and infect their minds. For these people, the devil of the scriptures is a being of the same nature. They also believe that the spirits of the dead return at night to haunt mortal beings for evil done to them during their lifetime. Similarly, the evildoer is believed to be condemned to walk on earth after death. All these beliefs are cruel symbolization of universal human phenomena of a feeling of guilt toward one fellow man. There seems to be something indestructible in these archaic beliefs. Though they undermine the validity of theory based on observation, they reveal a deeply hidden inner need for precocious explanation and intuitive truth. Man seems to find a supernatural connection between himself and his universe. He desires the healing of the body and mind to proceed by supernatural means. Consequently, He too often expects supernatural results from the work of the physician. He wants his physician to be not only a scientific man, but also a miraculous healer. Greek medicine. In contrast to the popular craving of the mythical interpretation and magical cures, we find certain of the ancient Greeks embarking on such an objective truth. Thus began the slow evolution of a body of medical facts and theory. Hippocrates, whose name symbolizes classical learning in the medical field, had this spirit of daring inquiry, the pure representative candor of the culture that, in its thirst for knowledge, was brought to the study of man's mind and all the processes of inquiry and thought. The ancient Greek philosophers, who devised their own rigid system of fiery logic, tend to cut themselves off from clinical experience, preferring theoretical deduction and practical induction from the facts. In the opposite camp were those who dealt with life only empirically, considering clinical observation rather than logical thought to be the true basis of knowledge of the sick. History reveals the scientific battles were frequently between these opposite groups. Even now, the huge body of medical science consists of the most part of a gigantic catalogue of clinical facts collected from the observation of sick persons. Only gradually do we find growing theoretical unity being imposed upon the diversity of facts. Despite conflicting opinion and differences in schools of thought, there did exist in Greece a desire for pure scientific deduction without a devaluation of practical clinical data. Hippocrates, who depicted the physician as a servant of nature, said, quote, "A physician who, at the same time, is a lover of wisdom, resembles the gods. He has had no special training. There is no affectedness about him, but he is a simplicity and serious-mindedness in thinking, and in life itself, also in clothing. His talk is characterized by seriousness, moderation, quiet, sagacity, quick-wittedness, and logic, and only the discovery of truth in the aim of his endeavors." Close quote. In the Hippocrates' Oath, to which today's physicians still adhere, he founded the moral basis of the medical art. He realized by the intuition the importance of mutual transfer of feelings and emphasized the need for securing the patient's cooperation. The Hippocrates Oath is condensed symbolization of the ideal physician-patient relationship. Such a simple declaration, quote, "Such a simple declaration was adequate for the dawn era of the modern medicine, but it does not go half far enough for this modern psychiatrist," says Dr. Maurice Levine, professor of psychiatry at the University of Cincinnati. For today's psychiatrist, facing issues immeasurably more subtle and sophisticated than any that confronted Hippocrates. Dr. Levine suggested at the meeting of the Ohio Psychiatric Association a revised version. Its key point in the summary: "I shall follow the good advice of Hippocrates' Oath, and if I ever find myself doing a medical treatment for which I am not prepared, or trying to be seductive to a patient, I will recognize that I have a serious neurotic disorder and try to get treatment. I will not give drugs because I am impatient, nor use psychotherapy because I have free time. I will observe myself as well as my patient, and if at any time I detect in myself too much anxiety, too much sympathy, too much coolness, or too much conceit, or difference, or leniency, or strictness, or any other excessive attitudes, I will make an honest attempt to modify them by my own efforts. I hope that I will retain a perspective about myself, that I will never think that being a psychiatrist means living on Mount Olympus. If, however, even after stringent self-scrutiny, I do not see any issues with my own personality that interfere with my work, I shall breathe a sigh of relief." Hippocrates was very much aware that there are many therapeutic tricks which astounded the mob or impressed the patient, but had no healing value. He wrote several diatribes against such quackery and scolded as impudent man's admiration for what is new simply because of its newness. The theoretical rivalry and vanity of the various Greek medical schools, for example, those of Cos and Cnidos, is paled beside the magnificence of the medical system to which they have given birth. Within the scope of this chapter, it will suffice to mention only a few of the many theories. The oldest of the ancient concepts were derived from the system of natural philosophers, according to whom the world was built on the single principle responsible for the origin of disease. The greater complexity in the structure of the world was recognized. The theory of disease became more complex. Democritus connected diseases with an atomic level. According to his, contagious diseases were due to stray atoms from other planets which found their way to Earth. According to another theory, described by Euryphon in one of the oldest Greek scripts of medicine, Anonymous Londinensis, life originated in food. From the nourishment that the body took, it selected what it needed and excreted what was useless. Whenever could not be excreted, the so-called perisoma might start to ferment and, if not removed from the body, was capable of causing disease. The Greek philosopher Equidox divided life into 4 equalities: hot, cold, wet, and dry. Substances in general was compounded of 4 corresponding elements: fire, air, water, and earth. In man's body, the 4 qualities were represented by the 4 flowing juices: blood, mucus, yellow and black bile. These were the 4 humus essentials of life. A balanced mixture produced eucrasia, or good health. Imbalance caused dyscrasia, or disease. Black bile was produced in the feces and conducted to the liver. Mucus was created by several glands, and in the case of the common cold, suppressed mucus was emitted from the brain through the nose. Empedocles' theory was that illness might arise in the humerus where wrongly mixed. For example, fever resulted from the mixing of the mucus with the blood. A later development of this fluid theory of disease was the acceptance, in addition to the humerus, of kind of central principle of life called pneuma, the vehicle of the soul. Herophilus extended the concept further, stating, the feeding energy is located in the liver, the warning energy in the heart, the thinking energy in the brain, and the precipitant energy in the nerves. Like us, he defined disease as a disturbance of the normal functioning. The whole store of the Hippocrates' almost prophetic wisdom included in this book on air, water, and places. Here are mentioned the various factors that may bring about dyscrasia of the body, some of which science has hardly yet had the temerity to explore. Hippocrates gives the account of the cosmoterioric and ecologic influences that affect diseases, such as season of the year, temperature, the quality of drinking water, nature of the wind, type of soil, and the total way of life of every man. For example, he says that those who live near marshes always have large, solid excrement and are often dropsical. This is perhaps an intuitive reference to malaria. The surrounding effect of the character and the type of disease, which weather conditions determine epidemics, geographic situation, types of flora, etc., have their influence of the character of the inhabitants of each district. Asiatics, said Hippocrates, are mentally alert and effeminate. They love peace and dislike war. The reason for this is the temperature weather in their country. Because of it, they are less quick-tempered and not so ready to take the sword. Those who live in the mountains, rocky, high and well-watered region will on the whole be tall, hardy and manly, and such people will be literal rough and wild. To some extent, the Hippocrates nomenclature as related to character types survives even in our day. The connection of each bodily fluid or humor with a particular character type survives our use of the word humor, meaning mood. We still characterize sanguine persons as those of the warm-blooded type. Melancholy persons we say are the bilious types, having too much black bile circulating. We speak of choleric and phlegmatic persons. In the former, too much yellow bile was supposed to circulate according to the old theories, and in the latter too much phlegm. Plato, following the Hippocrates' idea, asserts this: Timaeus, that health is harmony and disease discord of the 4 humours. The theory of implications of the solid substance of the body is mentioned only in passing of the corpus hippocraticum. Apodictes was the first to formulate this theory more clearly. He said, "The body consists of special parts which are smooth, spherical, and fine. If the primitive parts have the correct measure, number, and order, they move smoothly through the channels, and if these channels are the correct width, the body is sound. A wrong proportion between the parts and the channels cause stoppage, stasis, and result in illness." The whole store of Hippocrates' almost prophetic wisdom is included in the book on air, water, and places. Here are mentioned the various factors that may bring about dyscrasia of the body, some of which science has hardly yet had the temerity to explore. Hippocrates gives an account of the cosmoteritic and the ecologic influences that affect diseases. The reason of this is the temperature weather in their country. Because of it, they are less quick-tempered and not so ready to take the sword. Those who live in the mountainous, rocky, high, and well-watered region will on the whole be tall, hardy, and manly, and such people will be a little rough and wild. To some extent, the Hippocrates nomenclature as related to the character types survive even in our day. The connection of each bodily fluid or humor with a particular character type survives in our use of the word humor, meaning mood. We still characterize the sanguine person as to those of the warm-blooded type, melancholy. Persons we say are the bilious type, having too much black bile circulating. We speak of choleric and phlegmatic persons. In the former, too much yellow bile was supposed to circulate according to the old theories, and in the latter, too much phrangem. Plato, following the Hippocrates' idea, asserts in his Timaeus that health is harmony and disease discord of the four humors. The theory of the implication of the solid substance of the body is mentioned only in passing in Corpus Hippocratum. Asclepiades was the first to formulate this theory more clearly. He said, "The body consists of special parts which are smooth, spherical, and fine. If the primitive parts have the correct measures, number, and order, they move smoothly through the channels, and if the channels have the correct width, the body is sound. A wrong proportion between the parts and the channels cause stoppage, stasis, and resulting in illness." According to this theory, food is assimilated in the body and undergoes division but is not digested or changed. Sometimes there will be alteration in the ducts that carry it, and that is the laxum or the strictum. Therapy, according to this theory, consists of administration of laxatia, which widens the pores of the body, or astringentia, which narrows and constricts them. At its peak period between 100 and 600 AD, Roman medicine absorbed all the Hippocratic theories and supplemented them with its own findings, especially in the field of anatomy. Galen, the friend of Marcus Aurelius and the greatest student of the Hippocratic corpus, attempted to synthesize the theory of humors and solid, dividing diseases under the following headings: diseases of the elemental liquids, diseases of the solid substances, the tissues, and diseases of the organs, change, location, and size. Galen and Marcus Aurelius both believed in the word pneuma, the life spirit that enters the body through breathing and leaves the body after death. In this pathology, however, Galen became more and more champion of the well-verified anatomic localization of disease. The impact of Hippocratic thinking. One of the Hippocrates' greatest contribution to medicine was his separation of the concept of disease from the sphere of magic and superstition. His emphasis on the factual observation extended even to this definition of mental disorder, which had been especially vulnerable to magic and spiritualistic interpretation. From the brain, he wrote, comes joy, delight, laughter and sports and sorrows, grief, despondency, and lamentations. And through disease of the same organ we become mad and delirious, and fears and terrors assail us, some by night and some by day, and dreams and ultimately wanderings, and cares that are not suitable, and ignorance of present circumstances, destitute and unskillfulness. All these things we endure from the brain when it is not healthy. On the sacred disease. As indicated previously, Hippocrates understood intuitively about transference and emphasized the great importance of physicians securing the patient's confidence and cooperation. He diagnosed several diseases by being emotional and psychogenic in origin. Yet, the greatest contribution of the Hippocratic school was its emphasis on both clinical observation and critical judgment. Its warnings against the compulsion of precocious explanation. It encouraged the correction of facts as well as examination of theories so that neither the intuitive, the logical, nor the empirical elements in the medical disease of the day might be lost. From this school, we learn, for instance, the Fictius Hippocratica, announcing the end of life, the various postures of man, the concept of fever as a symptom, and many other clinical observations. Even in our day, not enough attention is given to the purely clinical method by which physicians develop a special pragmatic approach to unsolved problems. Especially in psychosomatic medicine, we require a case history, an individualizing unique report. The pragmatic clinical approach means working with problems while at the same time remaining aware that they are not yet been scientifically solved. In this way, the clinician is able to use and apply a body of historical experience even without always knowing the rationale. In the science that will never be completed as a finished theoretical body, the physician has to use both historical and casual methods of investigation because man is forever changing entity. This continued change is a source of horror to compulsive laboratory investigators who like things to be static and labeled. The clinician, however, must make use of the tentative answers. Mercury, quinine, and silicyl were used long before their pharmacological rationale was known. Objective observation, however, is not always strictly followed by clinicians. When special theories dominate the mind, prejudice may dictate the way in which clinical facts are ordered and interpreted. These prejudices may be political, religious, or even scientific. We find even in the time of Hippocrates, with the emphasis on the clinical observation, that is, on clinical trial and error and correction, an attempt to investigate both aspects, individually and generally, induction and deduction. Hippocrates, so much more aware than we are ambivalent clinical methodology, wrote in one of his later books on ancient medicine, the physician in his wish to cure must work with the unfinished body of the knowledge of that both the disease and the disease should be observed. According to him, life is a continual experiment. One concept of disease emphasized the evil that intruded into man, who was considered merely a positive biological being. It especially emphasized the intrusion of the outside pathologic forces into a psychosomatic unit called the healthy man. What Hippocrates, however, called the diseased man was the affliction of the inner spirit of man combined with distortion of his picture of the outside world. It was a distortion not of biological and physical processes, but of the structure steering principles in man. The importance, then, of Hippocrates in this, he taught that both the disease and the diseased person must be observed, and that the physician must work with the unfinished body of knowledge. In doing so, he anticipated the later epistemologic separation into the historic science and casual science. Medical theory and medical observation always require a dual approach. They try to find strict generalizing rules but also ask for individualizing case history, the knowledge and uniqueness of the sick person. That is why Hippocrates also emphasized the history of medicine in his book. On ancient medicine, Hippocrates gave us the modest inquiring critical method by means of which the physician remains aware of the value of trial and error procedures. In doing so, he delivered medicine from the hands of sorcerers and shamans.